Welcome again to The Man Who Woke Up the Buddha. This is Season 3, Episode 3. There is such a thing as a free lunch. Previously, when Kesey arrived with Pāli the parrot, he got into a deep discussion with Sid about the Buddhist Pāli canon that the parrot had been named for. Meanwhile, Pāli checked out his new home, and Dai figured out his dietary restrictions, which included, to Sid's disappointment, not feeding him any gummies. Sid's youngest grandchild, Casper, had the feeling this might be the best day in his life. Well, maybe not as good as the day his dad and Sid took him to a Red Sox game, or when he got the awesome Lego Ninjago Dragon set for his last birthday, or when the treehouse Jake was building in the backyard was finally done. But he was pretty excited. For starters, it was one of those mysterious in-service days at Casper's school, so Sid said he'd come to his last radiation treatment. Even better, it was his dad's day to drive Sid to the hospital. Nothing like a little quality time with his dad and granddad, both of whom could double Casper over laughter when they did things like announce everything going on as if they were broadcasting a baseball game. Casper reaches for the peanut butter, puts in his knife, brings out a big chunk, drops it on his lap. We're waiting to see how he handles the jelly, folks. Last time Casper was with them, Sid and his dad had explained that Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy were able to put money under pillows and bring presents down chimneys by shattering the space-time continuum. Casper didn't believe in them anymore, but Jake insisted they were more real than most people. When he and his dad got to his grandparents' house, Sid wasn't ready to go, so Casper went to sit very quietly on the living room floor, a few feet away from Pāli's palatial aviary, the first grandkid who'd seen him. He was careful not to make any sudden moves, like his grandmother had warned him. But as soon as Pāli saw Casper, he pinned him with a parrot glare, and its toes gripped the perch harder. After a minute or so, however, he seemed to relax, so Casper whispered, "Pāli?" The parrot tilted his head as if he couldn't believe the kid knew his name, and then clicked a few times. After a few more seconds, Casper risked saying, "Hi, Pāli." A little hint of "Hoi" seemed to gurgle up from his throat. Zoe had told everyone that they would probably have to say their names quietly for a few days before Pāli would repeat it. So he pointed to himself and said just above a whisper, "I'm Casper," a few times. Then Sid called from the kitchen, "Time to go, Casper." "Sibu, come back!" "Don't worry, Pāli," Sid called, like he was talking to another grandchild. "We'll be back soon." "Yay!" Pāli answered. Casper was starstruck. His grandfather was already having conversations with Pāli. It didn't get any better than that. But things did get better when he found out Sid had gotten him special permission to watch the setup for the treatment on the same monitor the med school students used for classes. He actually saw the technician help Sid lie down on the treatment table, and then put his mask on and set up the red laser lines across his head. He didn't have to move away until they started to, as Sid put it, beam me up. The whole thing was like being in the space station. Zoe would be so jealous. Just when he thought things couldn't get any more better, Sid took him over to the main campus when the radiation was over. Casper's dad had told him not to tire his grandfather out after the treatment. He wasn't sure what that meant, but when he saw that Sid was walking kind of slow and seemed a little unsteady, Casper said, "Oh, I have to tie my shoe, Grandpa. Can we stop at that bench?" "Did your father tell you not to tire me out after the treatment?" Well, kind of. Casper, you know perfectly well that I'm capable of tiring myself out all by myself. But even though your shoe isn't untied, we can sit down on this bench here and you can pretend to retie it. It sure is warm," Casper said, wanting to say the right thing as he pretended to tie his shoe. "And my youngest and most perspicacious grandchild, who clearly wants to say the right thing. Do you know what it's called when it's warm this time of year?" No. It's called Indian summer." Finally, Casper relaxed and laughed. No, Big Sid, it's called Native American summer. There's the Casper I know and love. Are you hungry? Casper admitted he was. Do you have any money? Casper admitted he didn't. Well, Casper, there's no such thing as a free lunch, but let's see what we can scrounge up. When they started walking again, they noticed a sandwich board in front of a large brick building. Actually, only Casper noticed it. Sid was pretty much looking around, like he just arrived on the planet. Guess all that zapping was good for something, the Buddha thought. Nothing like a new perspective. At least there are good-looking girls on this planet, Sid thought. Well, not all that new a perspective, the Buddha thought. Look, Grandpa, Casper started laughing. Sure enough, on the sandwich board, someone had written, free lunch, with an arrow towards the door. Despite himself, Casper giggled. He really did try not to giggle when he was with Sid, but he just couldn't help it. When Sid saw what he was looking at, he proclaimed, Excellent! Just goes to show you that there's not always an exception that unproves every rule. Soon they were in line at a large student center, waiting for their lunch plates to be filled by a suspiciously happy collection of people wearing green aprons over tie-dyed t-shirts with 3 tiny strands of beads around their necks. Off to the side, a few equally happy and strangely dressed people sat on a rug, quietly beating on drums, snapping hand cymbals, and repeating weird phrases. Most of the students were sitting at tables haphazardly placed around the room, enjoying their free food and ignoring the chanters. But Sid was fascinated. Don't let on who we are, he said conspiratorially. But Gram, Casper said. Shh, Sid said. Try to blend in. Casper responded by looking as studious as he possibly could, although he felt way too short for comfort. Maybe people would think he was a dwarf. Well, maybe Sid could be like a professor. That'd work. Sid would be a professor and he'd be the professor's son or grandson. By then, they were at the head of the line where there was a jar for voluntary contributions. Sid handed the grinning, beaded brunette a $100 bill, adding, Keep the change, which felt like something the Buddha would say. It was kind of funny the first time, but that was millennia ago, the Buddha thought. After having his plate filled with stuff no self-respecting 8-year-old would eat, and getting a glass of lemonade that was way too sour, Casper followed Sid, who sat in an empty chair, indicating that Casper could sit on the floor at his feet. I'd go right to the dessert if I were you, Sid said. What part is the dessert? Casper asked, confused by all the colors and smells, and in general, the fact that the meal didn't appear to have any of the usual lunch foods, like salami, macaroni and cheese, or peanut butter. That brown crumbling stuff, I think, his grandfather said. Grandpa, Casper whispered as he started listening to the chanting. Who's Hare Krishna? The Buddha laughed as quietly as he could. He couldn't wait to tell Krishna about the kid calling him Harry. Let's go find out, Sid said, having found the meal almost as disappointing as Casper had. Casper followed him over to a large poster board on an easel near the chanting people. It had a picture of a man wearing an orange robe with garlands of white flowers draped around his neck. The man's head was shaven, and there were 2 white streaks on his forehead that made it look like he'd been painting a ceiling. His hands were clasped in front of his chest, although it wasn't clear whether it was a kind of prayer thing or he was rubbing them together and getting ready to smack you across the side of your face. His skin was an interesting shade of brown that went well with the orange robe, and he had a large nose, big floppy ears, and thick lips that turned neither up or down. Much like the curious position of his hands, it wasn't clear whether he was smiling at you or thought you were a lower life form. Underneath the picture it said, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The Buddha looked at the easel. Must be an incarnation of my buddy Krishna, he thought. But he sure doesn't look like he ever rode into battle on a giant eagle. Maybe Pāli is an incarnation of Garuda. Sure is colorful. Of course, since Krishna and I are both manifestations of Vishnu, then Sid's an incarnation of him too. So why am I doing all the heavy lifting here? It was your turn, Krishna piped up. Remember, I had to work with that guy Timothy Leary last time. What a long, strange trip that was. The Buddha shook his head. This whole incarnation, manifestation, avatar, and guru thing has gotten way too complicated. You said it, brother, Krishna chimed in again. As soon as we think we've finally convinced humans are all one, they start making organizational charts again. Sid crouched down and whispered to Casper, I think this AC guy is competition. See what I mean? Krishna said to Buddha. Totally, the Buddha answered. I can't believe I ended up incarnating in a guy who doesn't realize we're all on the same team. Talk about bad karma. The Buddha laughed and Krishna joined in. They both knew that karma was the ultimate illusion. Well, one of the ultimate illusions. Then they blended together briefly, and Krishna moved on. Well, Sid whispered to Casper, I know we're all on the same team, but I better find out for sure. He walked over to a tall, bald, and grinning guy who appeared to be overseeing the action. Take me to your leader, Sid said, pointing at the picture. I'm afraid Prabhupada crossed over. You mean like he's in Europe? Sid asked, trying to remember if he could fly so soon after radiation. He hoped the guy would be back in America sometime soon. The tall guy smiled. I'm afraid he died. What the hell did he go and do that for? Sid blurted out, his dreams dashed of talking with the guy about enlightenment and stuff. Well, his new friend said, laughing, if it makes you feel better, we consider death just a change of body. Every once in a while, Sid thought of so many funny things to say at the same time he was speechless. The guy thought it meant he wanted further explanation. Well, listen up, maybe you'll learn something, the Buddha thought, struggling to maintain compassion for his latest incarnation. We believe that it's just our temporary body that dies. The soul continues to live, just in a different state. Prabhupada, he said, pointing at the picture, said that death tests our attachment to our body and to people and things connected to our body. Well, that's one way of putting it, the Buddha thought to himself. Huh? Sid said out loud. Casper tentatively walked over to hear what they were talking about. He felt conspicuous, but there was one girl there about his age, or maybe a little older, and she was really, he was kind of attracted to her in a, I wonder if I could kiss her cheek kind of way. But he wasn't sure whether being seen with Sid would impress her or not. She noticed him looking and smiled and looked away. Deciding that was a good sign, Casper moved a little closer to his grandfather, so it was clear he was part of this important discussion. Would you like to join us to chant some morning? The man was asking Sid. Casper tried not to laugh at the image of his grandfather in orange robes chanting away. When do you start? I have anaplastic ependymoma, so my doctor says I need a good night's sleep. 4 a.m., the man said without missing a beat, as if he heard the phrase anaplastic ependymoma all the time. But really, you can chant anytime, anywhere, or just stop by for a few minutes. I'm Ashoka Krishna, by the way, he said, reaching out his hand. Hi, Ashoka, I'm the Buddha, Sid said, shaking it. I'm his grandson, Casper said, reaching out his hand in a very grown-up way, with a quick glance over at the girl, who was indeed looking at him. Really? Sid said. I thought Ashoka was a Buddhist name. It's all one, the guy and Sid said at the same time, laughing. That's telling each other, the Buddha thought. Well, if that Pada guy isn't around, is there someone else who I could talk to? Ashoka was still American enough to wonder if he was being jerked around by this guy, but still Krishna consciousness enough to enjoy it. We finished our chanting around 8:30, he smiled. Why not come for the last 15 minutes sometime, and I'll introduce you to our teacher. Are the words hard to learn? Sid asked. Ashoka Krishna just laughed. He knew Sid was joking a little, but decided to play it straight. No, just Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Ashoka chanted it a couple of times. Now you try, he said, looking at Casper as well as Sid. The Buddha chanted along too, putting in the occasional om to keep it ecumenical. Sid said it in the same mumbling voice he used for the Jewish prayer for the dead. And Casper kept saying Harry by mistake, but they got through it. Casper was torn between thinking the girl would think he was cool and that he knew the words, or that he was just weird. The Buddha shook his head and smiled. The boy's feelings are so natural. That's the true path. Feel better already, Sid said. I'll come next Friday before my follow-up to my follow-up appointment. Where are you? Our temple, Ashoka said, heading Sid off at the pass by adding, Yes, we call it a temple too, but it's really just a large house. The Victorian mansion next to the new science center over there. Sid looked in the general direction. He'd figure it out. Hey, can you come, Casper? I have school, Casper said, a little disappointed but also relieved. He noticed that the girl had stood up and walked with her mother over to the dishwashing stand. She left without looking back at him. Sorry, Casper. Life is suffering, the Buddha laughed. Wait till they teach you about abstinence. By the way, Garuda, who they talk about, is the divine eagle-like bird that Vishnu rode into battle. But since Krishna was an avatar of Vishnu, he got to ride Garuda sometimes too. Don't worry if you can't follow all this Hindu cosmology. Sid, the Buddha, Krishna, and I can't either. The main thing is I think he looks a lot like Sid's new parrot Pāli. There's a picture of him in the actual post on Substack. Thanks for listening to The Man Who Woke Up the Buddha. As I've said, paid annual subscribers receive a free paperback of each season for reference, or to catch up, or because, like me, counterintuitively for someone who publishes online, they still prefer reading on paper instead of screen.